I've always been interested in psychology. I used to read a bunch of books, not just to learn about myself, but the people around me. So it was only natural that when I was reading up about Filipino history, I stumbled upon Sikolohiyang Pilipino, or Filipino Psychology. So today I'm going to give you guys everything that I learned about Filipino psychology and basically give you guys the spark notes, or the TLDR. It all starts with the story of this man, Virgilio G. Enriquez, also known as the father of Filipino psychology. Enriquez earned his BA in philosophy in the University of Philippines in 1961. Shortly after 1966, he went to Northwestern University, where he earned a master's degree as well as another degree in social psychology. But when he returned to the Philippines to teach psychology in 1971, he realized that a lot of the terms and the concepts that he learned at Northwestern didn't really make sense in Tagalog, or even in the context of being Filipino, and thus Sikolohiyang Pilipino was born. Sikolohiyang Pilipino, or Filipino psychology, is a psychology rooted on the experience, ideas, and cultural orientation of Filipinos. By contrast, Western psychology is historically hypothesis-led, quantitative, and logical pattern, which is good. It allows us to systematically break down the behaviors that we're observing. But what if the behaviors that we're observing are distorted, and we're only looking at it from one specific angle? If we don't have enough context about a culture to fully observe a behavior, we are ultimately missing the bigger picture. This is one of the problems with Western psychology. When it comes to explaining behaviors from other cultures, it doesn't capture the nuances. It's often told from an outsider perspective, looking in. What we actually need is an insider perspective. Filipino psychology is just that. It's a subset of a larger umbrella of indigenous psychology, and values the complexities and differences of psychological experiences from various cultures and countries around the world. In other words, it takes into account the nuances of a culture. Methods of Filipino psychology include a lot of qualitative information gathering methods that make more sense in the context of Filipinos, such as patatanong-tanong, which is asking around, or pakikipamuhay, which is living with other people. These information gathering methods are more familiar to Filipinos, and depending on the rapport that the researcher has, can gather important information that you would miss with Western methods. So here's some basic concepts in Filipino psychology. Since the Philippines is a collective culture, a lot of these values are in relation to other people. For example, the word hiya. Hiya literally means the shame that you would feel towards a larger group. And so in a sense, a lot of the actions and behaviors that you display are with the goal to avoid hiya, or shame. Another one is utang na loob, and it's this inner sense of debt or gratitude. For example, this is when maybe a person helps you and you have this inner sense of gratitude for that person that helped you out. Another one is pakikisama, or companionship. This is the idea of putting aside your own goals in order to accommodate for the larger group, even if it might not be something that you ultimately want. But these three concepts can be seen at just the surface level. Enriquez explains that these three concepts are just the branches to a larger trunk, and that there is a concept that runs deeper and ties everything together. And this is the concept of kapwa. Kapwa literally means other in Tagalog, but this translation isn't entirely correct. When you think of the English word other, it has a nuance that the other person is different from the self, that it's separate. But in Tagalog, when we say kapwa, or other, there's a recognition of a shared identity. There's no distinction between the other and the self. They're one and the same. Enriquez explains that this sense of kapwa is actually what makes a Filipino a Filipino. Once the ako, or I, starts thinking of himself as separate from kapwa, the Filipino self gets to be individuated in the Western sense, and in effect denies the status of kapwa to the other. Therefore, kapwa is the most important value and concept that anyone with a Filipino heritage must understand. It's the core of what makes a Filipino, and what makes a human. So why does this matter? Why do we need all these new terms? Enriquez's goal was not to completely reject Western psychology, but to understand that it doesn't always build a complete picture. The more tools and words that we have to describe something ultimately lets us to describe the behavior more fully, and allows us to understand not only ourselves, but the people around us. And I think that was the goal of psychology to begin with. I personally didn't know a lot of these concepts before reading up on them, but it did give me a deeper sense of my own culture, and also the values that the people around me hold. I mean, I love the idea of kapwa so much that I got it tattooed on my arm. Right here. But that's in another video, and you can see that maybe over here. But that's pretty much it. Hope you guys learn a little bit more about Filipino psychology and maybe consider thinking about things from a different angle to see a more complete picture. But that's pretty much it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.